Listen up, fellow Democrats. Fight fake news and lies with facts. Save our democracy from right-wing hypocrisy. Keep our integrity, embrace our diversity. Whenever we're down, we always come back. So listen up, Democrats.
Hello, welcome to Progressive Oregon, a weekly engagement broadcast on progressive issues in Oregon. My name is Larry Taylor, and I'm with my co-host today, Betsy Cunningham. If you are in the YouTube chat window, you can type in questions, and they will be conveyed to us, and we will do our best to answer them on anything you'd like to ask us during the show today. Today's agenda, we will start with a weekly update. And then the most of our time today will be spent focusing on two counties that have really turned themselves around and are becoming powerhouses in the state. And then we'll be talking about some exciting upcoming events. So going to the next slide, many of you have probably heard what happened to the Democratic National Committee meeting yesterday in Chicago. If we go to the next slide, what happened was that the DNC limits the influence of superdelegates. This is something that has been in the works for 2 years. If you remember, 2 years ago in 2016, we had the superdelegates scandal. That was when it was most sharply pointed out when the delegates met in Minneapolis. Bernie Sanders was there. He walked into the ballroom where they were having an evening event, and he was swamped with people, but he was just out meeting the general public. There were not many Hillary Clinton supporters there because they were all off at private parties, and they were for superdelegates that had pledged themselves to her in advance. And what happened was that a huge number of superdelegates had pledged themselves. This was used in the media and aggregated along with the elected delegates. And it gave, well, it wasn't an illusion. It gave the perception that there was more general support for Hillary Clinton than there was possibly. And as the primary went on, Bernie Sanders got stronger and stronger, but he was never able to catch up with the lead that Hillary had. When we had the convention in Philadelphia, I was fortunate enough to be on the Rules Committee, where we spent the Saturday talking about things to change, and there were a number of motions that were made during the meeting. They were all voted down because the Rules Committee was comprised of 2/3 Hillary supporters and 1/3 Sanders supporters. So after 4 defeats, what happened was that Jim Weaver and the leadership from the Clinton campaign called for a recess. They went off and spent an hour and a half deciding what they should do. And this shows the power of even being in a minority. You can get in there and influence things. After an hour and a half discussion, Jim Weaver came back, met with the Sanders caucus of the Rules Committee, and explained to them that we were going to propose the Unity Commission. We then went back into a joint session of the full Rules Committee and passed that resolution, which was then passed onto the convention floor during the convention, and the convention floor also passed it. So that is what created the Unity Commission 2 years ago. That has been working all of this time to come up with a proposal. It was a little different than what we expected. The proposal that they came up with was that the superdelegates would not vote on the initial round of voting. And this then allows for a more direct form of democracy to elect the nominee for the Democratic Party in subsequent conventions. If it is a contested convention, and as we've talked on this show before, the 2020 convention very well might be a contested convention where no clear candidate has a majority going into the convention. Only the delegates, the bound delegates elected by Democrats in all of the primaries and caucuses will be able to vote on the first round. If no one receives a majority in the first round, then the superdelegates can join in on the subsequent rounds until we come up with a candidate that has a majority. And we hope that this will put behind us a lot of the contention and bad feelings that have been percolating in the background. So thank you so much. Our delegation from Oregon, I did not see this, but I'm about 99% sure they voted 100% in favor of this. It was actually passed by a voice vote on the floor of the meeting this past weekend, and that was passed yesterday. So thank you, DNC members, for doing this. Any questions on the chat line about the limiting the role of superdelegates in the convention coming up?
No.
All right. Well, we will go to our first guest today. Our first guest is Nancy Greenman. She's the former chair of the Linn County Democrats and is the current neighborhood leadership program. Welcome, Nancy.
Thank you, Larry. Glad to be here.
I am honored to have you. You're one of my favorite activists in the Democratic Party. Just to start off, if we go to the next slide, just to put in everyone's frame of reference where Linn County is. So Linn County is sort of in the center left side of the state, and it's on the north side of Lane County and, of course, south of Multnomah County. We have a quick voter registration profile of what's happened in the past 2 years. So the lighter blue column is the voter registration for the various parties in 2016, and the blue is what's happened in the subsequent 2 years. So there's been a slight increase of Democrats in Linn County. There's been a slight increase in independent Democrats. There's been a greater increase of Republicans, which is a little surprising in Linn County. They've gained about 2,000 registrants in the past 2 years. And then, of course, the non-affiliated voters, which is a result of the 2016 motor voter law, has jumped dramatically. And you can see that these are people that have not joined a political party, mostly because, well, one of the reasons which is that the registration process is not exactly user-friendly. And so that's the opportunity for all of the parties to get additional voters. The non-affiliated voters tend not to vote because they're usually barred from primaries. And once you get treated like that, you tend not to be encouraged to return your ballot. So Nancy, tell us what's going on in Linn County.
So in Linn County, first I want to say geographically, a map shows where we are in the state. For people who are in Oregon, Linn County is when you're going down I-5 and you pass through Albany, you're in Linn County, down to where the exit for Brownsville and Sweet Home are. But more important, when you're on Route 20 and you're going over to Bend or Eastern Oregon, you are at the top of the passes before you leave Linn County. So we are have our population sort of clustered towards the west, and then much of our county, as with many of the rural counties, is public land. And also looking at the voter registration, Alana and I were talking about how we are two counties that are red and rural, and we're on either side of Lane County, which includes Eugene. And that, because we share a congressional district with Eugene, we're in this strange but fabulous situation of having progressive congressmen. But when we look at our county politics, we are a county that went significantly for Trump. And although has a heritage of being blue in Union, has not been that way for a long time. And we, in fact, in our last reorganization, which was in February of 2017, we had become a small and fairly demoralized county party. We because of the bump that everybody got after Trump was elected, we had an influx of energy. I became chair after saying no, 20 times. I finally said yes. And we had a lot of activism. And so what we found was there was not a lot of infrastructure in place. So we began by really creating a team. And we have an executive team that really, really, really works as a team. And it's a really nice group. And the other thing that's I think wonderful about it is, as is with Oregon overall, we're metro area centric, and the rest of us are sort of trailing along on the outer edges. In Linn County, we tend to be Albany centric, and the rest of us kind of trail along at the outer edges. Our party and our leadership team really represent the whole county. So we have moved away from our population center and are more inclusive of the many smaller and rural areas, which feels really nice. And that's the team that works together. So it brings that breadth of perspective.
Well, I just have new affinity and affection for your county because I found out that my great-great-grandfather moved to Linn County in 1845 on the third wagon train of that year and settled and built the Presbyterian Church in Oakville and was a member of the first Oregon legislature and helped write the Constitution. The good parts, I'm sure.
Wow. And, because we are a nation of immigrants, at that same time, my relatives were, being like chased around by pogroms in Eastern Europe. Hilarious, right? Just that, that difference. And now here I am organizing in Linn County. So we built a strong leadership team, and I think that really has given us a foundation that we've built on. About a year ago, I moved from being chair to being neighborhood leader program coordinator. And I will tell you that while we have we have a strong leadership team that has meetings that are really, and one of our values, our most principal values, is to be welcoming. So at every meeting, we welcome new people, we recognize new people, we do a lot of outreach. At the same time, we've been canvassing solidly since October. And in October, we started canvassing as neighborhood leaders, right? Going out and meeting our neighbors. And we have neighborhood leaders. We have very few in the very southernmost part of the state, of the county, which tends to connect more with Lane County. But in the rest of the county, we have neighborhood leaders in very rural areas. So we started out by canvassing just to say hello to our neighbors and say, you know what? There are Democrats here. And if you remember a year ago, when people came to your door in rural counties, you'd be like, whoa, I'm not the only one. So we started with that. Then we moved pretty quickly into Measure 101. And in a county that went so significantly for Trump, we almost got to 50% yes on Measure 101, which for us was very exciting. From that, we went right into looking at the primary. And we have candidates that are running for county commissioner. We have Stephanie Newton, who is a young, dynamic. She would be the only woman on our county commission. She will be when she is elected. She's done a fabulous job of canvassing out every weekend, has made a lot of contacts. We have Jared Taylor and Renee Windsor-White, who are running for 2 House districts that have been Republican for a long time. So we also have some good judicial candidates, which are nonpartisan, but we're pretty excited about that we have candidates that we can support. And we've been using our neighborhood leaders. We've been using neighborhood leader to train people and get people comfortable in canvassing. And now what's happened is neighborhood leaders are out canvassing for the candidates. So I would say on any given weekend in Linn County, we have a significant number of people out canvassing. Either we have slate cards, so either they're canvassing generally or they're canvassing for specific candidates. And that's pretty exciting. We have the very most exciting thing that's happening right now is, after not having an office, I think since 2008, we're going to open our office on Monday. We're going to move stuff into it. And within a week or two, it will be open, which is wonderful for us because we have the capacity for getting out the vote and getting information out. And now we're going to have a focal point, a physical focal point to allow people to organize. Should I keep talking? I'll tell you one more thing.
That's fantastic. Yeah, please go ahead. And if you have events that you've planned for your office, please share those as well.
So the way we run neighborhood, so we have our monthly meeting, and it's on Thursday, the first Thursday of the month. We have every month 2 neighborhood leader get-togethers, one in Albany and one in Lebanon. And that is a time that neighborhood leaders and also friends, newcomers who are interested in having a smaller group discussion about issues and also learning how to get active, come together. We spend about an hour and a half doing that, having a conversation, and then we go out for a mini canvas in the area that we had to get together. And we'll pair up a newcomer with an experienced canvasser. One of the things that we use that for is to educate ourselves. First, we educated on the candidates who would come to these. Then we turn to ballot measures. So we have a cadre of people who really had some knowledge and comfort with talking about the ballot measures. And as we know, we got some heavy hitters on the ballot this time around. And it's going to be really important talking to people about it. So when we have the office open, what we'll be able to do is start scheduling more frequent events like that, where you can come in, you can get some information about how to canvass, but you can also get some good information about what's on the ballot, down ballot and up ballot. And we do tend to focus more on the down ballot and the ballot measures. So what we're looking forward to is being able to expand that model that's already been very successful, if that makes sense. People who look at lincodems.org, or find us on Facebook, will be able to see when we're going to have our office opening party, and then we'll start scheduling regular events as well as being open. So I'll stop.
How do you reach out to get new people involved?
So I'll give you an example. We had the Families Belong Together rally, right? Many counties had those events. Remember, a month and 2 months ago, maybe. And in our county, those tend to bring out people who we might not see otherwise, right? So in this case, there was an open mic. It was a lovely community event. About 200 or more people came. Sarah Geltzer, our fabulous state senator, kicked us off. Then I took the microphone and said, I'm also involved in an effort to bring an immigration legal services clinic to the community. So I talked about that. But then I said, I organize canvassing for the Democratic Party of Linn County. And if you want to get active, you're here and you feel like, this is your moment, come see me. And we signed up 6 people that day.
That's brilliant.
So, but it's not, it's just what we do. Larry does it, Alana does it. We're organizers, right? So, give us a mic and we'll reach out. So, and then people bring their friends or people find us. The state party has also been recruiting neighborhood leaders. And so we bring people in. But I think that having those regular gatherings has been very useful. There have been people who've come to 4 before they really felt like they were ready to canvass. That's okay, but you want people to be ready now, right? Because now is when the rubber is hitting the road.
So before we went on the air, we were talking about the Second Amendment Preservation Ordinance, and we included a slide on that. That is going on in the background in the rural parts of the state. Would you like to talk about that and how your county is approaching dealing with this?
So, we're just starting to. This is a so-called Second Amendment Preservation Ordinance, and for rural counties who've been tracking the so-called New Patriot movement. And I want to really shout out to the Rural Organizing Project. This is their graphic, and they've been so valuable to us in rural counties in giving us information. They've been working on this for really a number of years. And they were in Harney County during that occupation, supporting local communities. This reflects the belief of that right-wing segment that would have the sheriff be the highest level of legal authority in the county. So these ordinances would embed in the county charter that any law, federal, state, local, having to do with the so-called Second Amendment rights would be, the sheriff would get to determine whether it's constitutional or not. The sheriff, a law enforcement officer, would be vested with power that we would associate more with the judicial branch or the executive branch. That is determining the how laws will be implemented, whether they can be implemented. Ours, and I think it's a standard form, also gives the sheriff the right to fine individuals and corporations who are enforcing these laws limiting people's so-called Second Amendment rights. So, and I'll just throw this out for viewers. The person who signed our petition that got enough signatures to qualify for the ballot signs his name with the initials capital J, small y, capital D afterwards. And I believe that stands for junkyard dog. So you might want to follow that and sort of see where it leads.
Let's read through the counties and the status of each of the counties that they're targeting.
Well, and I told you before we went on that this is needs to be updated. I don't have it in an updatable form because, for instance, Linn just moved from signature collection to being on the ballot. So we should be in that list with Umatilla, Baker, Columbia, Douglas, Klamath Lake, and Union. You see, and I don't know where Deschutes, Lincoln, Grant, and Yamhill are with the signatures, but it may be on the ballots there too. I don't know.
So then we have the counties that have certified the petitions. So Yamhill, Lincoln, Grant, Deschutes. Then we have counties that denied the circulation of the initiative. Benton, Clatsop, yay, my county denied it. That's because we changed the makeup of the county commissioners to be progressives. Thank you very much, county commissioners. Crook County, Harney County, Jefferson County, and Marion County And then counties that are expected to have a chief petitioner is still a shocking list. So Clackamas County, Gillum, Lane, Malheur, Morrow, Multnomah, Polk, Tillamook, Wasco, and Washington. So some of the biggest counties in the state are still in the initial stages of getting this done. This one is very disturbing, and I think we need to raise this profile of this higher in the Democratic Party and get all the counties motivated on this.
And I think, Larry, I'll tell you, we've been, as I said in our get-togethers for Neighborhood Leader, talking about the ballot initiatives and talking about the challenge of how do you talk to voters when there's so much to talk about. Anybody who's done canvassing, having that much time to stand on anybody's doorstep is just, it's not practical, right? So what we in our first pass of talking about this SAPO, as it's called, ballot initiative, we agreed that we could talk about it when we talk about Measure 105, which is the end sanctuary initiative and go back to racial profiling, that both of those have the effect of putting law enforcement in a situation of doing more than just enforcing laws. That the whole idea of law enforcement would be making judgments about who's documented or not is sort of the same, gives us the same uneasiness as law enforcement determining whether a law is constitutional or not. We look for law enforcement to protect us and keep our county safe in a much more equitable way, if that makes sense. Yes.
Fantastic job in Linn County, Nancy. You and the team have done an incredible job of turning it around. What do you think is next on your plate to becoming more effective in your county?
Well, we are throwing our hearts and souls into the election. And I think that knowing that we also have this infrastructure, what will make us more effective is when the election has taken place, our ability to come together and learn from what happened and determine next steps based on that, if that makes sense. And, that's a mature organization, right? That you not only can get out the vote, but then you can take a step back and say, what do we need to do next based on what happened from our all-out efforts.
Yep. Anything you'd like to say in closing, Nancy?
That I'm really interested in hearing what Alana has to say, because part of how we do work, seriously, is we get to learn. I love the state meetings because, we have rural caucus and we have other leadership opportunities to learn from other counties. And we have taken a lot of our best stuff from our sisters and brothers in other counties.
Larry, the Oz LaFave has a couple of questions for Nancy. What is your opinion on how to build activism on issues? And do you believe that commitment and trust communication, diversity of capabilities, adaptive creative freedom are important?
I believe so. I'm going to answer the second one first, and I'm going to, I want to respect Alana's time, as I said, so I'm going to say it briefly. It's something I care about a lot. In working on, I said we were bringing an immigration legal services clinic to our community. We're also a community, Albany, that just passed one of these enhanced law enforcement zones, which is at least in part, if not in total, to try to keep people without houses at the margins of our community and not pull them in. And one thing that we say that is our basic value in doing this work is communities that pull in rather than push out thrive. Everyone has gifts, and good leadership and inclusive organizing recognizes that and concentrates on how do you create a space that's safe for people to bring their gifts. Does that make sense? Okay. The second question. Oh, the first question. Just tell me again, Larry. I'm sorry.
Hang on, everybody. I'm jumping in. What was your opinion on how to build activism on issues? You really kind of covered that very well. Larry had that already in the list, and in chat they kind of resolved that as well. So thank you very much.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Were there more questions, Betsy?
There was one about the superdelegates. You want me to ask you that?
Why don't we hold that to the end? We'll go through
All right.
Alana, and then we'll talk about the DNC in the wrap-up.
We'll do that.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time this morning, Nancy. Go out and do great stuff.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. Next up, we have Alana Lenihan, who's the current chair of Douglas County. I have a strong affinity with Douglas County because the former chair, Lorna Hayden, was also a good friend of mine. Let's go to the picture, doing a profile of Douglas County. A little bit more of a challenge for Democrats in that state. So on the slide shows where Douglas County is. It's in the western part of the state, sort of center bottom. Again, it's just below Lane County, and then there's a layer of counties between it and the California border. Also on the I-5 corridor, which I suspect is where the majority of the population is. A little bit more of a challenge in the voter registration there as well. I believe they actually lost Democrats in the past 2 years. There's been a slight increase in the independents. There's been an increase in the number of Republicans. And like every other county, there's been a huge jump in the non-affiliated. So Alana, when we're talking, maybe if you're doing some kind of outreach to include the non-affiliated, we could touch on that. So joining me today is Alana, chair of Douglas County. Welcome so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. So these numbers, the voter registration numbers, I want to just address that. Part of this loss of Democratic voters in Douglas County is related to the mass exodus of our youth. Douglas County is a hopeless area. There's very little hope here. There's very little positivity, and our youth are fleeing at huge rates. It's just outrageous how quickly those in the 18 to 24 age bracket are leaving our county. They're just abandoning us. And I understand. I don't fault them at all, but that's made a huge difference in our Democratic numbers.
So your county has also had a turnaround. Let's talk about what you did to reinvigorate the Democratic Party there.
What we did back last year, we took a whole different perspective. There was a lot of focus on what was going on nationally, with Trump being elected, with what was happening at the federal level, what was happening at the federal level with the DNC. And we decided to, instead of focusing on those things and focusing on the negativity that was going on there, we were going to focus on local races, what was happening here in Douglas County, what change we could affect here. So we actively recruited 2 candidates, one for House District 2 and one for County Commissioner. And we spent a lot of time taking a look at where we could be effective. So what changes needed to happen? We needed to be putting people on school boards, we needed to make a change in the county commissioner. We need to support candidates in city council. So we're focusing almost entirely on local politics, with some state stuff. Obviously, the initiatives, the stuff that's going to be on the ballot in November is very important. So we are doing some work there, but we're just trying to build from the ground up. I mean, it's true grassroots. We got to start here. We're not going to build anything until we can, for lack of a better way to say it, flip this county and get our people involved. Douglas County is a county, again, it's very hopeless here. There's also a lot of fear if you're a Democrat or even a non-affiliated left-leaning progressive. There's a lot of fear in, I've had rallies where people are afraid to come because they're afraid of being shot. I mean, there's that level of fear here, and we're trying just to overcome that. The current saying we have is less fear, more pride. We need to be proud of what we believe in, and we need to stand up for it and be less afraid.
It's awesome that you have a office, and you've had it continuously for quite some time. How are you able to afford that? Do you have like a lot of donors that contribute to the party, or do you have an angel that writes a big check?
We have one huge fundraiser every year that funds this office. We have a fantastic rent that we pay here. It's not, we get a really good deal. So it doesn't cost us a lot of money to have this office. But we do that. We do the Auflegel dinner every year, dinner and auction. And that's coming up October 21st. And we typically make enough money on that dinner to fund the office and whatever expenses we have for the year. We just finished a strategic planning session with some of our best volunteers, and we've got to move past that being our sole fundraising activity, because where we can keep the office and we can maintain what we're doing, we can't add anything to what we're doing because we don't have enough money to do that. So we will need to increase our fundraising and make some changes there.
Have you participated in the neighborhood leadership program?
I have participated a little bit. I signed up originally before I was even chair to participate. My neighborhood is very hilly and hard to walk. And at some point during doing that, I acquired a 6-year-old who lived with me for a while. So it made it a little difficult, but I did attempt it, and it's a lot of fun. I'm very much about identifying who the Democrats are in our area and pulling them out. Like I said, there's a lot of fear here, and we need to get past that. We need to be able to identify not just the Democrats, but the left-leaning, non-affiliated voters, and get them active and get them to participate. And that's something we're working on now. Like she said, we do a lot of rallies, and we pull a lot of volunteers out from our rallies, and we just need to be able to build on that. And that's something I am not the best at, and I'll be honest, I'm not the best at volunteer engagement. It's not my skill, so I'm working at delegating that to someone else. I can usually,
as good leaders do.
I can usually get them here. I just don't know what to do with them once I have them. So I'm working really hard on finding somebody who could fill that position, because it's just not in my wheelhouse. It's not the thing that I do. I'm very much about organization and getting the big ideas and getting things moving along.
So rallies is something we've not done. What do you do when you do rallies? How do you structure them? How do you get the word out? How do you get people there?
In Roseburg, we have one major street that almost all the traffic in Roseburg goes down, Garden Valley Boulevard. So what I do is I just make a Facebook event. I send out all of the information to every group I can think of. We like to partner with our ally groups, and I just send it out to whoever will listen. And sometimes we have a speaker, sometimes we don't, but a lot of times it's just the act of getting there, standing on the side of the road with your sign. And we've had people pull over and come and ask, how do I volunteer? How do I get involved? So yeah, I mean, it's not hard. We just advertise and say, come meet us here. And our last event had almost 250 people, which for us is a really good turnout. And, you know.
So tell us about your candidates that you recruited, and how are they doing?
Okay, so we have House District 2, we have Megan Salter. She's doing really well. And I think that this is the perfect time to get her elected. We have a very weak candidate on the Republican side. It's Dallas Hurd. His record is not pretty. My understanding is he's probably voted on less than half of the things that were available to vote on when he was a representative. He's not been in Salem when he was supposed to be in Salem. He just hasn't done his job. So I think now we have a really good chance of with Megan to break that Republican stronghold on that seat. We've been actively campaigning for her since she announced, and it's all, you know, we're taking a very grassroots approach, and it sounds like Linn County is too. It's about talking to your neighbors and, you know, having your sign and your button and being at the local park and just talking to people and giving out your RAC card or giving out your candidate information. Megan has a really solid education and background. Her specialty is education, and I think that helps her bring something new to the table instead of the typical businessman that we've had cycle after cycle. And I think that this could be the year of the woman. So I think she can do really well. The other candidate is not a Democrat. I'll preface it by saying that he's not an affiliated voter, but it's Megan's husband, Jeremy Salter, and he's running for county commissioner. This is his second attempt. Again, I think this is definitely a race that could be won. There is no incumbent technically in this race, and the field is wide open. There are currently 8 candidates running for this office. 6 of them, if I'm not mistaken, are Republicans. So the Republicans technically could split the vote 6 ways, which means Jeremy could honestly win with less than 25% of the vote. So this particular race is all about name recognition. So it's about getting his signs out there, talking to your neighbors, repeating his name over and over and over again until your friends are tired of hearing of it. And that's what we're doing.
That's very exciting. So what's up next? What are the next steps that your county needs to do to become more influential?
We're trying to fill out our volunteer base. So we're trying to fill in the volunteer positions that will support what our executive committee is doing. Like I said, we need a volunteer coordinator. That's something that we're working really hard on, trying to develop what that position will look like, and then developing the volunteer that would fill that position. And then we're looking for, we're working on putting together a fundraising committee and getting a fundraising coordinator so that those things don't fall on the chair. When I took this position, the chair did everything. And unfortunately, because historically that was the way it had been done, that was the way people expected it to be done, that the chair was just going to fill in all those positions. Every chair that I was aware of before I came along was retired or self-employed, so they had the time to do that. I work full-time. I don't have time to do that. So I need to work on getting, as our executive committee is working on getting those, filling in all of those pieces of the puzzle so that we can be stronger. My vice chair calls it the back office structure. Then we're trying to fill in all of those things to support the chair, so the chair can be the person with the big ideas that can direct and do what a chair is supposed to be doing instead of the minutia.
That's absolutely right. You're absolutely headed in the right direction. I finally had to get into tough love mode here in Clatsop. If someone does not step up to lead something, it's just not going to get done, because it's not healthy for one person to be doing all the activity, because you don't you don't develop the expertise amongst people who can then step into these higher roles later on.
And my executive committee is really good at pointing out to me when I'm taking on too much responsibility and I need to delegate. We had a conversation just this last week about our calendar because it hadn't been updated, and somebody says, well, who updates the calendar? And I said, well, I do. And they're like, why are you updating the calendar? That should be somebody else's job. And I'm like, well, because I update the website, and then I update the Facebook page, and then I update the calendar. So I just do all those things at the same time. And they're like, those aren't your jobs. We need to find somebody else to do those jobs. So, but like I said, previous chairs, Lorna excluded, but previous chairs wanted all of the responsibility. So we're having to break that mentality and with our volunteers and get them to realize that they have an active place with what's going on here.
Awesome work. Anything you'd like to say in closing?
I'm looking forward to November. One of the things that I didn't say and was talked about was the ballot initiatives that are coming up. I really believe this is all about education. I think a couple of the ballot titles are very misleading. So it's all about getting that information out there and having the conversations with our neighbors, with our friends, with our family members, and making sure that they understand what these ballot measures are all about. So that's something that we're working really hard on here is, even amongst the people that I hang out with, which are almost all Democrats or progressives, there's some confusion on what these ballot measures actually are going to do. So it's all about getting that information out there. 105 is a big one. The term sanctuary state, I think, is extremely misleading, and it's very volatile. The grocery tax one is another one where I think the title is misleading, and we need to be talking about what those measures are actually going to do. And so that's what we're doing right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning. It was great to talk to you.
Well, thank you for having me.
Bye-bye. So just to circle back to the question from the live chat, the question was regarding superdelegates. Can you discuss the distinction between the first ballot and the second ballot voting? So if you're an older person, like senior citizen, you might remember as a child the televised conventions being very exciting, and they would go into the conventions not knowing who the resulting nominee was going to be, and for many years there were backroom deals that actually decided who the nominee for the party would be. Then we went through a period where they really wanted to make it more democratic, and so we had delegates bound to how states vote. So like here in Oregon, if 65% of the people vote for one candidate and 45% vote for the other candidate, those are the proportions of delegates that go to the convention to cast their vote, and they're actually bound to vote, and they're allegedly get a fine if they don't follow who they are bound to vote for. And then we had the superdelegates who were unbound and could vote for anyone. So in the last couple of decades, and I cannot remember the last time it was not a contested convention. Going into the convention, there was a clear winner that had more than 50% of the delegates. And so by going into the convention with more than 50%, we know that person is going to be voted on the first round, and there was only one round of voting. So the distinction between the first ballot and the second ballot is if we have a first ballot at the 2020 convention where none of the candidates receive over 50%, then we have a second ballot. And it's my understanding that the rule change that they just voted in is that on the second ballot, then the superdelegates can weigh in, and they're unbound. And so the voting is going to shift around. And so if they're lucky, there will be a clear winner on the second ballot. If there's no clear winner on the second ballot, it'll go to a third ballot until someone achieves 50%. This is one of the core concepts of democracy, and it's not like a primary where there could be 3 candidates running for the party's nomination, and one candidate receives the most with 45%, so they become the nominee from the party to go on to into the general election. So it's not like that. You have to get 50% on a ballot in order to receive the nomination. Is there any other questions outstanding, Betsy? Oh, there's another one. My opinion on how to build activism on issues. Oh, good. And thank you for the donations from Super Chat. We got $7 from Oz. Thank you, Oz. So our final segment will be on upcoming events. We have 2 more live streams. One later today is another in our series of live stream broadcasts on Robert's Rules of Order and Parliamentary Procedure. This one is on incidental motions, and this really is the toolbox that allows you to hold your own in these meetings. And there are some of the incidental motions that really make clear that the will of the majority is who should be determining what happens in your group, not the chair. So if you want to learn about those, please join us today. It's a little bit dry, but and the intention is not to actually learn these, but to get a taste of them. So when you need to use these in the future, you know that these tools are available for you, and you can research the details behind them and figure out how to use them. Next Sunday, we will have a special Robert's Rules presentation on nominations and elections. And this will be a little bit more expansive. We will start out talking about the Oregon statutes that govern the county party and the state reorganization events. For some reason, these are never talked about, and I swear I was a chair for a good 6 years before I knew that these statutes existed, and I was a little shocked to find out, number one, how specific they were on the activities of the counties, and number two, where we had been deficient in not meeting our obligations. So there's things that we have to do as chairs to notify the county elections office, and there's dates within which we have to hold the reorganizations, and there's requirements around notification to the elected and appointed precinct committee persons. So we'll be going to the state laws, and then we'll be talking about how to interpret bylaws that are the next layer of governing rules, and then where things are not specified in the bylaws or the standing rules, then what parliamentary procedure guides us in terms of conducting elections. So this will be an important one for all of the reorganizations that will be kicking off in this next cycle, which starts right after the November 6th election. Going on to the next slide, we will be having our own progressive caucus or progressive contingency nominating convention, and the tentative date that we picked for this is November 11th, and this is a departure from what has happened in the past. In the past, what happens is that these reorganizations sort of sneak up upon us, and no one has time to think about who should be actually running our organizations. And unless someone has been extremely motivated and wants to get in there and do something, it just sort of happens. And many of our elections are not even contested, and so we end up with default candidates. This is what happened in the Democratic Party for over the past decade, where the leadership was never contested, no one ran against them, and it ended up in a culture of anti-democratic processes. And so what we want to do is make sure that we go into the reorganizations with as clear a vision as possible of who we want to run our counties and our state party going into the next cycle. So we have a nomination form where you can go in and nominate people, and these are for the offices in your county or for the state. And you can enter the name and the contact information and what position you think they're good for. It would be great if you would contact them in advance, so this is not news to them. But this is really to help the progressives in every county organize their candidates. This is not my intent to control what's going on, but really to push the democracy down into the counties and into all the state delegates across the state in electing the leadership going forward. So if you would go out to advancementofdemocracy.org and put in the candidates that you would like to see run, would be most appreciated. If you have a great incumbent, and Alana is a great example of that, you're more than welcome to put in your existing leadership if they deserve to be reelected. And we have a number of great county leaders who deserve that. So what we want to be able to do is get people to think about who they want to lead their organizations going forward in advance. And if you go to the next slide, this is what the Advancement of Democracy page looks like. And there's now a new button to click for two things. One is for nominations, and the second one is to actually reserve your spot. So the nomination convention that we are scheduling will be from 2 to 5 on November 11th. It'll be virtual, so you do not have to go to a physical place in Oregon. You can watch it online, and if we are technically savvy enough, we'll be able to pull in candidates from across the state to speak, so you can see the candidates that we're putting forth, and then we'll allow each county to vote for the leadership they want if there's more than one candidate running for positions. So very exciting stuff on the Democratic reorganization issues coming up. And again, that starts immediately after the November 6th election. We go to the next slide. Just to review upcoming events. Remember that August 28th is the last day to file for the November 6th election. We would still like to see some great candidates here in Clatsop County running for the municipal seats, and it's probably similar in other parts of the state. We still have another few days in which to register candidates to run. Immediately after that, August 30th is when the voter pamphlet statement is due. So if you do decide and file on the last day, your first order of business after filing is to get your voter's pamphlet and your picture into the elections clerk so you will be published. That is a primary source of voter information on who they vote for. October 28th is when the ballots get mailed. And of course, the general election is November 6th. November 11th is the day for our Progressive Democrats convention. And then December 2nd is when we have the 2018 fourth quarter meeting of the Democratic Party of Oregon, which will be in the Portland metro area. February 23rd and 24th is when they've scheduled the chair and vice chairs retreat. If there are new vice chairs and chairs that get elected, this will be their first meeting and joining it with their peers from across the state. And then the Democratic Party of Oregon reorganization is March 16th and 17th. That's it for today. Is there any final questions for us, Betsy or John?
Sorry, I'm going to jump in. Bill Gabriel had a really long question, but I think we should save it for another time. It was all about Peter DeFazio. So,
yes.
We'll talk about Pete another time. He's interesting. I just wanted to say thank you to both Alana and Nancy for everything they're doing, and I want to urge everybody out there to join whatever group or party they want and get involved at the bottom level, because that is where you will make change.
Yeah, and I just want to let people know in the description of today's show, there's contact information for Linn County and Douglas County parties, as well as Clatsop, which Larry is the chair of.
Indeed. Thank you. So that's our show today, John. If we have no further questions, I think we're ready for our exit song.
All right, then. I'll take
whatever that might be.
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you all for being here. This was a really informative show, and I really appreciate everybody for taking the time to do it. This is modern democracy. This is good. And I'm happy about that. Thank you all for being in the audience. We had a decent sized audience today, 20 people watching right now, and I know more will be watching later. I had a song pick to go out with, but it was totally wrong. You ever have like you wake up in the morning and you got one frame of mind, and then later on you have a different frame of mind? So we're not going to go out with that song. Maybe another time. I just went with one of Larry's faves. So we're going to go out with Sharon Jones and the Dap Kings. This Land Is Your Land. because it's neutral. Let's go with that. So, all right, everybody, we'll see you later. Like in an hour and a half. Join us for that. More Robert's Rules. Get out of here.
This land is your land. This land is my land. From California, well, to the New York Island. From the Redwood Forest to the Gulf Stream waters. I tell you, this land was made for you and me. As I went walking down that ribbon of a highway, I saw above me all that endless skyway. Now I saw below me that golden valley, and I said, this land was made for you and me. As I was walking, now they tried to stop me. They put up a sign that said, oh, it said private property. Well, on the backside, you know, it said nothing. So it must be that side was made for you and me. Yeah. One bright sunny morning, well, in the shadow of the steeple, down by the welfare office, I saw my people. You know, now they stood hungry. I stood wondering. I was wondering if this land was made for you and me. This land is your land.